Welcome to the Boardroom Sessions podcast. In these sessions, we meet the most amazing and interesting people. We learn about their passions, their business models, cool new technologies, and of course, their lessons on personal growth. I hope you enjoy. In this Boardroom Sessions, we meet Rob Anthony, VP of IT at Hoffman Southwest. Rob is leading Hoffman on a digital transformation journey, and we dive deep into the weeds on how exactly he's doing that and transforming Hoffman. Hope you enjoy it. Rob Anthony, welcome to the Boardroom Sessions podcast.
Hey, good morning, Mike.
All right. So, Rob, you are here at Hoffman Southwest, right?
Yes, absolutely.
You are the functioning CIO, the VP of IT, and a longtime friend and colleague of mine. And so tell us a little bit about what Hoffman Southwest does.
Well, it's great to be here, Mike. Well, first of all, Hoffman, real great organization. There actually is a Hoffman family. So there's kind of the American dream going on there. 70-year-old company, started by a family in the plumbing industry, and they're affiliated with one of the oldest known plumbing names in the country, which is Roto-Rooter.
Roto-Rooter.
So the Hoffman family.
Wash your troubles down the drain, something like that?
Yeah. Matter of fact, you'll
rinse your troubles down the drain.
Well, I won't ruin the jingle, but if you if you listen to some news channels on the radio, you'll start to hear a resurgence where some talk show hosts are reading our copy and playing some of the 50-year-old Roto-Rooter ads.
Oh, wow.
So,
well, they were pretty iconic, and so I would imagine that's advertising that takes a lot of effort to get to
that
today.
Brand recognition, sure.
So
what you have is a company in the retail space, emergency services and repair services that are known as drain cleaning. But what a lot of people don't know about Roto-Rooter, see, I immediately go into commercial mode, right? Yeah. Is that we're also plumbers,
right?
So that is the area where the Roto-Rooter brand spends some time, really trying to sell themselves into, repipe and other plumbing services, not just drain clean and drain clear. So it's a big part of the brand. So the legacy brand for Hoffman Southwest Corporation and the Hoffman family was Roto-Rooter. We're the largest Roto-Rooter franchisee in the nation with 12 franchises, mostly in the West and Southwest.
About 1,100 trucks out there?
No, 1,100 employees. So I wish it was 1,100 trucks. But about 300 technicians on the Roto-Rooter side. Okay. And then the other brand that's very prominent and kind of the most emergent brand is Professional Pipe Services. And that's Pro Pipe, as it's known.
Pro Pipe, right.
Based out of Phoenix, a little bit bigger than Roto-Rooter. And what it does is as Roto-Rooter is primarily a retail and consumer-oriented company, although we do have some very big commercial companies that make hamburgers and have signs that have big red targets on the front of the building.
Sure.
The Pro Pipe has municipalities, cities, engineering firms, water districts, and that's much more of a hardline business. So the capital to enter that business, camera trucks cost $250,000. Vector recycler trucks. You're talking about
those are the trucks that you use to remove water and things so you can get into the pipes, right?
Water and sludge. So think about it, when you've got a
big vacuum truck,
thousands and thousands of waste to remove. These are trucks that are larger. They're halfway between a trash truck and a big rig in terms of their size, and they're quite intense. So when you see them running a 18-inch hose under the street, you realize the power that takes to run a vacuum of that size. But we're water flow specialists in that regard, so we're often hired to inspect pipes and provide some surety that there's no grit, there's no root penetration, grease, that the pipe is functional. And many cities around the country are Pro Pipe customers. As well as Pro Pipe, we operate a few small retail stores, just two, California and Arizona, Western Drain Supply. Okay. And although it's open to the public, it primarily serves the trade. In 2019, we'll be taking that into an online primary business. We'll talk about that a little later. And then from an M&A perspective, we're always on the hunt for new companies. We just acquired a company called Tri-State Utilities, which lands our footprint in the Mid-Atlantic region. and they primarily serve defense-related clients. So again, it's another facet of rounding out consumer, business, government, but our end game is all about plumbing, water flow, safety
Right.
in various capacities.
Those infrastructure projects that ProPipe is involved in with the municipalities has some pretty cool technology in it too. That we'll discuss some of the ways in which you're doing
Sure.
the 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 mapping and the photography and the
Yeah.
GPS and all that kind of fun
We
stuff.
we
We'll talk
are
about that.
we are primarily, and from a deliverable perspective, GIS multi-layered digital maps, which need to be delivered electronically, and then multiple proprietary formats of very large scale video. I mean, these are DVD sized videos of underground pipe infrastructure, and it's an intensive amount of data as well. Sure.
It sure is, and
Hmm.
some pretty advanced technology. Uh, I was definitely taken aback when we started talking about the video projects and things of how much and the codecs and the technology involved in that. That's some advanced technology rolling out on those trucks to go look down those pipes, and it makes sense, but you don't think about it when you drive by the
You
truck.
just think that it's just going to happen, right?
Yeah,
But yeah, there are some complications there, and even though there are some intended standards in the industry base, they are not like technology standards where it's more hardline. So people say that they're influenced or that they follow certain technologies, and
right.
when you try to get various camera gear to work with various film codecs, uh, it can get complicated,
Sure.
let's say. So, essentially, that if you really wanted to get down to it on the commercial side, our product usually is amounts to an inspection video for safety purposes. And then, depending upon the market and who's hired us, we also do in place pipe repair and other types of repair. And when you think about repiping your house with a little, half inch or three-quarter inch pipe, that's easy to pressure fit. But when you're trying to use a sleeve and resin to reline a 2 foot diameter underground pipe that's clay,
That goes
that's
for
that's
miles.
collapsed, it's a little bit more complex,
Right.
infinitely more complex. And there are some,
And regulations
oh,
and
sure,
codes and things that you have to adhere to.
most assuredly, most assuredly. So the business itself is interesting. The opportunities to automate its workflow so that it can scale at a much greater rate than we're scaling now. That's kind of where I live on a daily basis. And really, historically, you look at the model of legacy, right? Roto-rooter franchises. So even though franchisees can choose to centralize or decentralize their model, when the Hoffman family started up other units like ProPipe, they let them run fairly decentralized. So from purchasing to how they handled certain projects to whatever it was, there really wasn't a mature model of service delivery where by and large, everyone was doing the same thing the same way. And that still holds true partially to even finishing out 2018. We just now are really reshaping it. And if I can kind of even step back a second, what happened a few years ago is the Hoffman family sold out to a private equity firm.
Right.
And so now the company is owned by a fairly large concern, a company called Oryx USA, that owns about 125 companies, and their level of investment as far as capital is tremendous. The level of investment in evolutionary process is also phenomenal, right? So, and of course, Oryx USA is owned by the Oryx for those that all went to business school. I mean, Oryx Limited out of Tokyo, I mean, $150 billion company. I mean, they are a substantial concern. The Oryx USA guys out of Dallas and Oryx Capital out of New York, they're all fantastic to work with. So they brought in our CEO and CFO, who in turn brought me in. So I've been here a little less than 2 years. And, most people, I mean, any organization that buys a company has a next step, which is ultimately we're going to sell the company for a profit. And having the opportunity to have been at some startups that went public or working at some public companies, uh, I was able to develop a footprint that we're implementing now that really, I think, You get the opportunity to be nimble where you want to be,
Mm-hmm.
but then when the GRC comes into place and you have more of a regulatory or a compliance based focus, having leadership in all aspects as an experience, it's really helping us grow in that way. But when you think about it, the business is really kind of runs under 24 roofs, a little over 1,000 people, $150 million a year company roughly. And you had just had a situation where, like we talked about the franchise model, it just wasn't going to get to $250 million a year that way.
Right.
And so we really started looking at saying, okay, how do we retool the business to make it scale?
And that's essentially the segue to when we first met here at this role, right? So Rob, you and I have known each other for a few years prior
Right.
to this, in and out of the same community, Orange County
Right.
technology professionals, regular friends with Devin Hornick and mutual other acquaintances. And at any rate, when you came here, there was that impetus for growth in the organization, and getting from where you were at that time, Hoffman, being
Mm-hmm.
where Hoffman was at that time, to where you wanted to be. They fingered you to do the job, right? And so you came
Exactly.
in and evaluated the scenario. And what I'm excited to share with the boardroom sessions folks here today is you are the textbook case for a digital transformation in an enterprise. So you came in to this organization. There was everything on premise, everything in a server closet, not even in a advanced data center, but in a server closet, essentially.
With a leaky wall.
With a leaky wall,
Right.
right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Old phone system, old call center,
Old SQL servers.
but call center that's handling calls for Roto-Rooter, booking appointments and things. And everything in that infrastructure world was up on the table for a better way to do business. And we looked at things together as a team and came up with some phenomenal uh, order of events and sequence of events that in 2 years have transformed where you're at. And I'm pretty excited for us to explore some of that and talk through that thought process. So, if you could kind of go down history lane here, when you first walked in the door, how did you tackle that project, knowing that your job was to modernize the IT infrastructure and optimize the IT stack and staff so that you could advance and grow in the manner that the company wanted to?
Well, that's a small question. Well, first of all, when I came in, I was coming out of many, many years of a different industry, right? And what I was relishing was the opportunity to try a new industry, obviously in my field of expertise. And what I've learned and have come to know through commerce is that, first, you never learn anything when you're talking. So try to ask a few questions and listen as much as possible. And I heard some of the things we had alluded to just in the previous few minutes, that they wanted to grow, wanted to scale, and much like other industries like mortgage or other service industries, that you can't just keep throwing bodies at it, right? I mean, there's too much fringe. You got to rent more real estate, you got more benefits, you got everything. So how can we smarten up our business to where we can grow without sounding cliche, grow profit, spread the margin, right? And everyone kind of realized automation was the answer. But what I walked into was a situation where you had three gentlemen, two technicians and essentially a network engineer functioning as operations manager, all with hearts like a lion, right? I mean, these guys were committed, worked hard, but they were really just operational, not strategic, not software development, not adding real business value, kind of sitting behind the plate and catching whatever pitch was
Sure.
thrown at them, right? So
Which is the same with every infrastructure
yeah,
environment,
right. So really what we did was evaluated that the company needed a better ERP system.
Started with the big gap, right?
Right.
And
The biggest gap was, really the ERP system, and then would the company be better served? Kind of look at everything as, some people call it bronze, silver, and gold. Here at Hoffman, we call it good, better, best, right? You assess your scenario, And kind of from an agile perspective, you say, okay, what's going to be good? What's going to be better? What's going to be best? Mm-hmm. If you make a bridge too far, sometimes you'll never get across, really. So we kind of iteratively went through and said, okay, look, if we augment our service model systems, will they get us there? We toyed with that for a while. It wouldn't work. We determined to go kind of to the mid-level. So, okay, we're going to rip out our financial platforms. So in the midst of all this, assessment saying, hey, you need new ERP, you need new phones, new data network, you need a SQL server, you need a data warehouse, you need all these different things.
It's kind of the domino effect,
like,
right?
oh, by the way, the one thing that does work, your financial system, I want to rip that out also. Now, reporting to the CFO, he looked at me. I'm not sure he was 100% on task with that at first, but once I modeled out the case and the return on the investment, I will tell you that Hoffman did successfully roll out an entirely new GL and financial platform middle of last year. But essentially, everything is built around kind of a triad, and what it involves is one corner of that is, or the tip of the spear is the ERP system, the other being what we call reporting systems, and then the other being support systems like that's where the UCAS, the intranet, which is pretty extensive, and even our other support infrastructure. Mm-hmm. So kind of that three pillars, those three corners of the pyramid, or three pillars, whatever you want to call it. And so, I mean, when you look at it and you say, okay, we're going to tackle now field services management, booking clients, appointment setting, and most importantly, not only recognizing but collecting all that revenue without fail. Right. We had really kind of a four-step approach. Eliminating the legacy system, which, believe it or not, is Fox Pro based and used this
so you're going
to this
from
day.
An old school technology, software based on hardware that you have in the data center, right?
Yeah, it's actually
phone systems that are I think they were close to 15 years.
Yeah, well, let me give you the layout on that. I mean, you're looking at a system running out of Kansas City on SQL Server 2008, character-based Fox Pro, served up by Windows Remote Desktop, right? You're using a Mitel on-prem phone system. Right. You're using an MPLS, single-source data network.
Private network.
That backhauls to this building, not to a data center. Right. No real DR planning, no centralized reporting system, no intranet for communication and policy sharing, no help desk system. Right. Just all managed by email. Right. So
all of which are found out during the cascading effect. Like when you walked in the door, you didn't finger the phone on the first day and say, hey, this guy's a short timer, I'm taking care of this. It was, I have an ERP that we need to make a decision on. Mm-hmm. And then there's this cascading effect through the financials, through the service, which is the call center, which is serviced by the phone system, which is tied to the network. So it's this domino effect, the cascading effect of digitization, right, of cloud enablement that come into play.
Yeah, I mean, really, you had to sit there and assess. I mean, and I think that's where we did a fairly solid job. You're starting at the top, but then realizing as you strip it all back down to the bottom and building up to say, okay, look, we need to have various support services and utility level services. They need to be to our benefit, but we just don't want to shoulder the load of, we don't want to replace existing infrastructure with new, hard to maintain infrastructure. So a couple things that were to the company's favor ultimately were that some of those business arrangements, because of the lack of technical sophistication in-house, they were fairly lopsided. And I'm not going to keep mentioning names, but some of those providers had very egregious contracts in place in terms of their rate, their term.
The favor was all in their favor.
In terms of what the services they were providing, the market had certainly moved to the client's benefit, and Hoffman had not been able to capitalize on those benefits. Yeah. So when it came time to make a lot of those assessments, there was kind of a catch-up model where, we looked at everything and said, okay, what suits the business? SaaS first generally is going to suit the business. Right. We didn't just sit around with a bunch of bits and Legos and whatnot and say, okay, hey, I'll have this great idea to be SaaS first. Right. Let's see if it works.
Yeah. Let's go to the cloud. Let's go to software as a service.
Right.
SaaS, right.
It was more or less
all of our applications out to the cloud because that's the cool thing to do. it again, it was part of the domino effect. You had an
Right.
ERP system that was provided as a cloud model, right? It was given to you, delivered out over the internet.
Yeah,
right?
we chose the best ERP for us. The best option for that ERP was cloud.
Right.
We wanted to build a SQL Server. I just refer to it as SQL Server because it serves various analytical cube functions, as well as there's a data lake in there. I mean, it's not just one stack. It's a combination of things. But because of its incredible growth potential, again, we said, how do we preserve the investment without forklifting anything out? Well, again, Azure SQL Server
Right,
as a service
public
in the cloud.
right?
Don't buy a $150,000 server.
And from an access point of view, your scale, you can access it from anywhere. You don't have to worry about the old ties of a private network and having to tie into that application. You can access it anywhere from any device, from anybody you give access to.
Right, and then when you look at things, even again, we'll call it the plumbing, as it were, right? The data networks themselves, single hall, private network, very high risk. If the corporate office had any sort of issue, which it's had, there have been a couple catastrophic events, unfortunately, in this building over the years. The building's about 35 years old, and just about 7 years after it was constructed, it burnt down.
Wow.
I mean, that was a substantially impactful event. There have been unplanned power outages.
We met during one of those
right,
power
exactly.
outages, and that was an entree for a new thought process
Right.
around unified communications. Right. It
Right.
was the problem statement was we were going to have in 2 weeks a planned power outage with SoCal Edison on a Saturday, which they thought was doing you a favor, right? Which unfortunately nobody
Our
knows
busiest
your
day of
business
the
model.
week. Yeah.
Said more people do
Right.
plumbing calls on a Saturday than any other day, and so you needed to have your call center taking calls on a Saturday on a very old phone system with a very old hardware-based server system that was going to have no power to it. So what we ended up doing was got a unified communications solution up and running in a couple of days, tested, tried. You ran calls on a Saturday. That was your proof of concept there for a model.
Yeah, I'll even throw in, and of course, an appropriate drop for Ring Central as a partner, not to mention SidePath and yourself as a partner. Though, like the willingness and fortitude that they had to help us conduct a test when our disaster recovery event was over and we were going to fail back to Mitel, you had this very impassioned look on the entire call center that they literally did not want to go back.
Yeah.
And that's what really, I think, set Ring Central apart as far as a service partner to say, okay, look, they didn't have to sell us that hard. I mean, you and I talked about Ring Central, talked about a few others, but once the test worked so well, people just really were believing the product. And so in that case, you've got a situation where through some other justifications that we can talk about or not, but from a technology standpoint, we went from an MPLS private network backhauling to this building and our only internet access going out of this building to spinning up a data center in Irvine with a really good partner that we've used before. And it serves really as the communications hub. It's not even co-location, it's the location, the primary location.
Right.
So now we're in a multi-year phase out where we're just preserving early termination fees, right, with our incumbent network provider. Yeah. But just about every branch now has a Velo Cloud device with dual network paths, Ethernet over fiber and Ethernet over cable, or in the case of the incumbent MPLS, you still have the MPLS backhauling to corporate, but then you have the second line. I was almost going to say backup line. In fact, they are not backup lines. They're active lines, and then our QoS partner manages the voice and video traffic because that video traffic is key. So we have dual path networks that don't rely on this building. They go direct to the internet. They are SD-WAN managed to the data center.
Right.
So in fact, with a reduction in network service costs, so think about it this way. I had a private MPLS network. I now have, running to a leaky closet, I now have collectively a data center in Irvine, California that's an amazing data center, multi-channel SD-WAN network, that's managed by a third party for
Right.
traffic shaping. Um,
And for trouble tickets and
and
for all of it.
and writing all on top of that is Ring Central UCAS, Ring Central video conferencing, none of which ever breaks.
Ring Central call center for your call center
Call
and
center,
scheduling appointments.
right? And I would say when you're really looking at it, our year one costs came out pretty neutral, right? Almost cost neutral, or year zero, as it were. Second year costs saving $20,000 a month. Third year and in perpetuity. Remember this. This is not a one-time shot. This is in perpetuity. Just under 30 grand a month. So $350,000 to $360,000 a year
That's incredible.
over the previous 10-year spend.
Right.
And we're on one of the most advanced phone systems you can obtain.
So there's a textbook example of the digital transformation journey of starting with a key application, right? That moves itself from being in your server stack environment, infrastructure environment to a cloud-based service. And typically, this is a story that's written all over town. This is what Mike does for a living. And CRM, ERP are the big tails that wag the dog.
Right.
And people start getting their feet wet with moving their email out from on-premise out to O365, and then this whole cascading effect starts to happen, right?
Right.
You're exactly what happens. You have this private network that was on MPLS that was great at the time. It served a purpose. The main purpose was quality of service, right? We were all buying quality of service on a private network to keep everything internally routed so that no one else could get a hold of it, and we could route our voice traffic to our phone systems, which were typically on premise. And so that's changed. You want access to your cloud applications, you need good internet access, and you can take advantage of using the best of breed internet anywhere in an SD-WAN world. And you have application-aware routing, and you have the ability to add on more cloud services like unified communications, which enhance your whole footprint here.
Because remember, some of these opportunities, Mike, they don't walk in the room and ask you for help, right? So when you look at it and you say, okay, you got a company, in our case, spending about $1.2 million a year on travel, right? We looked at the Ring Central Rooms conferencing system, not to mention the peer-based video capabilities of, let's say, a dispatcher or a branch manager talking to a technician in the field. Just the Ring Central client at each one of those people's hand, it now allows techs in the field to show video content to the people they're talking to at the offices, saves drive time, right? The Ring Central Room system, our investment, although somewhat substantial, a drop in the bucket compared to the forecast 150 to 200,000 a year of incidental travel, where you got these branch managers and regional managers who make the circuit, now can meet with every other individual they need to meet with in a large-scale video conference, plus share content from a conference room to people at their desks, to people on an iPad in a Starbucks, to a technician sitting in a parking lot in his camera truck looking at a handheld device.
Right.
So that's a case that didn't build itself. We had to turn around and build it, and then it was adopted.
Yeah, and that's a great point here, because for one, just for the record, boardroom sessions listeners, this is not a Ring Central commercial, but it might sound like it. But when you and I first started talking about a different way of doing communications than the Mitel on premise, right? We were talking about nuts and bolts. We were talking about costs, contracts, renewals, inability to scale. Those were the things that were important, right? So we were talking about like for like environment, and now you're coming up with actual use cases that you're using and seeing cost justification for that weren't even on the roadmap when you first started having
exactly. The opportunities started to kind of present themselves in the ether,
right.
And then we just continued to formulate them and proof them. And my procurement manager who works with me, she's phenomenal in that, once you have an operating model and an expected costs associated with it, I can assure you she'll make it happen. But
Drive
yeah,
adoption. That's good.
yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, and there are other things too as well. I mean, just in terms of getting off the topic of unified communications, and even with mobile devices, we're a company that has over 800 cell phones and 450 tablets. So when you look at the large tier players that are out there, we had to spend again north of seven figures, 1.1 million a year. The level of service and the quality of devices that we had in play uh, were part of what was an effort driven result, but the result just wasn't what the company needed. So, without taking a single phone or device out of anybody's hand, we worked with the existing partner at the time, who I won't mention, but we're able to reduce the spend significantly from them to much, in a begrudging way, right? But then what that did was it gave us the tenacity to keep looking into what we were really trying to accomplish with managed cell phone services and the type of services we wanted to deliver to the field. And I'm happy to say that in from 2017 at 1.1 million, dropped that to just north of 800,000, just barely north, without taking a phone out of anybody's hand. We're now working with Sprint, let's say, for instance, on developing a subassembly kit where we get the right tablet configured in the right way with the case and the screen protector and everything, and still have reduced our cost even further. But it was partially we need to reduce cost, but really driven by how do I completely digitally enable these plumbing technicians in the field where they can video conference with their dispatch, they can know their appointments, dispatch can know where the truck is by use of GPS, and then serving the customer, they can give them the estimate, receipt for the work. We can recognize the revenue, everything we need to do with little to no paper. Actually, very soon, absolutely no paper.
Right. So it's just email or a text or whatever format they
Right.
want to have that invoice sent
Yeah,
to
there's
them.
some waters to navigate around some California consumer rules
Hmm.
that have to deal with, not everyone is electronically enabled.
Right.
So a customer is owed the opportunity to receive a disclosure
Sure.
from certain types of contracting bids. And so in some cases, there still is a piece of physical paper associated. But if so inclined, you could do the whole thing paperless at this point.
That's an awesome use case for digitization out to the edge, right? And so you did a fairly good job of describing to a technical guy what SD-WAN is, right,
Mhm.
and what it does for you. But for the audience that may not understand how the difference is, let's talk a little bit about that because I think it's super important as you describe the benefits you've realized here at Hoffman from unified communications, from these tablets and mobility. They are all enabled by an SD-WAN network, right? And they're all better served application awareness in particular by an SD-WAN network. So there's a lot of buzzwords around it. People are talking about it. It
Sure.
seems to be one of the biggest trends right now in the client base is to talk about it. But you went from at each one of your locations, at each one of your corporate and all of your different offices, you had one single private network connection,
Right.
and it was expensive and it was tied into one carrier, right?
Exactly.
And so everything had to run internally into your own network stack there. And if anybody needed to get to the internet, they had to traverse that network
Yeah.
and go out one pipe so that you could control the security functionality
Right.
of that, right?
Right.
So you flip that on its head with a new technology today and put two internet circuits everywhere in the
Mhm.
network into a device that gives you the ability to not only go to those cloud applications and go enable to these applications that are out on the handhelds to everyone, but give everybody access to everything and then see it all by the application level. That sounds like a quantum jump, a quantum lift in networking. How has that proven itself out to you?
Well, I would say that it's proving itself at this point in that, in terms of getting the right information to the right people when they need it, it's fantastic. It obviously creates a few new attack vectors from an info security and data privacy standpoint because we've got the employees' information to protect as well as our client data
Sure.
to protect.
Now everything's routing through the internet, right?
Right.
And
So
so
you're
you've got some some holes to shore up and some policies to enforce.
Right. So, trying to maintain the appropriate levels of security when the data is in motion, make sure the connections are secure, even when the data is at rest. And, with the way vendor management as a science and an art is running now, you can't just punt and say, oh, well, we outsourced that. You have to attest for the surety provided by those folks as if they were your own employees.
Sure.
And let's just say that I spend an inordinate amount of time reviewing SOC reports to attest to the validity of some of these services and their in the way they run. Like even our payroll provider, who's one of the largest in the market or largest in the world, perhaps, their 2018 SOC report and bridge letter is sitting right there across the room from us as I'm about to review it for our auditors. But the important part, I think, is that people just can't undersell the concept of multi-factor authentication. Sometimes what could be perceived to be as inconvenient info security practices, password complexity and rotation schemes that you need to put in place, as well as, most importantly, the weakest link in all of it, is the human component. So we spend a lot of time focusing on social engineering training. We have utilities.
Do you actually have tests where you try and stump people by sending them things and seeing if they open it up?
Much to certain people's dismay, we absolutely do. There's a couple great products out there. Fantastic products. We actually use two of them. One more as a mandate from the mothership, and that's based on Wombat's scheme. I'm a big fan of Stu Sauerman and Kevin Mitnick's Know Before product.
Okay.
Exceptionally easy to administer and use, and then it provides a curative path. So if people kind of fail the test, you can link them right up to the training material. So the goal is not to be punitive and punish people.
No, the goal
is to reduce.
Educate, right? The goal is to educate and let people know where those threat vectors are coming, right?
Right.
That email is suspicious and not to get clicked on. Just delete it and notify IT that I deleted this file and it looked bad.
Right. So file attachments, social engineering. We do a number of things, from masking and blocking callers and certain call, DNS strings, email domains. You've got various clickjacking technology going on where with the advent of SaaS, you sometimes get a lot of console messages. So you think you're getting a Microsoft Office 365 or a Windows console, and really you're putting your password in the clear. And unfortunately, we're a services company, so there's fewer people that they're going after. AP, the CFO, the CEO. But the level at which they're being pursued is more intensive than the CEOs of the banks and mortgage companies of where I was CIO.
Yeah.
So a lot you have to think when you're moving SaaS first or SaaS facing. Some of that savings that you're going to pick up perceptibly if you're moving off a lot of legacy iron, you need to 100% account for the fact you need to up your InfoSec practice. And I'm a big ISACA believer. So
ISACA.
Having a CISA, or more importantly, even a CISM on staff, or developing that. I'm currently developing 2 people into CISM status and 1 CISSP.
Okay.
Who's more or less my hardcore engineer. Uh-huh. You can't emphasize enough on security. Yeah. So that's probably the biggest thing I would say in moving SaaS first or SaaS facing that a lot of people don't account for going in. And I would just advise everyone listening to really think hard about that going forward.
And that just goes into a lot of different rabbit holes. One that you didn't even touch on in the SaaS world yet, but is also rendering itself in lots of different ways, is the fact that data that is in everyone's hands, that's okay to have. The data that's for example, maybe some of your municipality's video, for example, okay? There's reasons to share that amongst the team, amongst the client, maybe even amongst a partner that might be doing some construction or something like that. But who's watching that data and seeing if anybody took that, uploaded that somewhere? So the data itself, where is it, who has it, and who's sending it to each other, right?
Right,
So
that's important stuff.
very important stuff. It's scary, and most people forget about that. So I like to use the analogy of the castle. We all have been in a network world used to building the walls on the castle, big gates, and drawbridges and things like that to keep people out of the castle. But in this world of SaaS and people passing back and forth files, you and I could be in collaboration on a project, and I have the keys. The drawbridge is down, and I'm being welcomed in the building, right? And then you hand me the jewels, and I'm using them for our project. But who knows that I'm not handing those jewels off or a copy of those jewels to somebody else? And
Right. I mean,
that's a whole nother ball of wax there that we're solving problems for today with my clients, and we call it the CASB, Cloud Access Security Brokers, are looking at that stuff,
Right.
that information, and finding out who's using it, who's passing it, and things. So there's a lot to think about in the new world. But that being said, it's a far better world for the way you're communicating, the way you're
I think so, and it's important that you have to assess the perimeter both logically and physically. I mean, I've personally witnessed a very large data center, also in Irvine, down there in Fiber Alley. The front door has double man trap, barbed wire fences, hand scanner, security guards, and then on the side of the building at a loading dock, there's a door propped open with a Home Depot bucket.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, that's not a an analogy. I mean, I actually saw this happen because I thought to myself, I can feel a warm breeze. Why is there not cold air coming? And I saw that the side door was open, and I thought, okay, I'm not so sure I would want to move my systems into this data center. And ultimately, we chose another partner. But another thing to kind of touch upon too is support systems from a transformative perspective.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you're talking about a 70-year-old company who had never had a help desk system.
Right.
And so one of the things that kind of portends of is that some decisions were being made emotionally. Oh, we have printer problems. We have communication problems. We need more bandwidth, or we need more, or we need different. But there was no ability to quantify decision making to say, okay, well, what is bad? Well, the CEO said, well, if the branches are calling, if a branch calls more than 10 times a week about their network speed, then maybe their network speed isn't fast enough. That was an actual conversation. I said, well, that branch hasn't called 10 times ever that anyone can prove, because there is no quantification system, and surfing through emails doesn't really work. So the two things we did was we established a online help desk platform, service enabled, so that people could be socialized into always contacting a help desk as opposed to a person, their personal hero.
Give you metrics.
Give us metrics to support. And then as well, much of what people are looking for in a geographically distributed company is information. So we basically, long story short, put in a decent help desk system with good reporting capabilities, built a small in cost but rich in volume intranet system that's fully indexed and fully searchable. So I now know where I can call 14 hours a day to get help. I now know where I can look 24 hours a day to find any sort of written policy and procedure.
Dissemination of information.
And so the ability to know what's happening, the ability to find information, it's a much less tangible return, but I think that it's yielded some really great results. And we also did that last year. Yeah. And in comparison to ERP and UCAS and everything else we're doing, it seems as though kind of a small bolt in the big machine.
Yeah.
But there's just no substitute for team members feeling informed and empowered to know, they can help themselves, so to speak, as opposed to just completely stopping short if anything goes wrong.
That is a a lot of work you've been doing in the last 2 years, Rob. And so
Well,
to
we have
come
not
in,
even talked about data warehouse systems,
yeah.
but yeah, there's been quite a few things going on for sure.
And so what a transformation underway here. And what I'm encouraged about is my good leaders all speak in terminology that their business is looking for. Yours is finance. You immediately go to what the cost was, what the cost is today for these services, showing the cost justification, showing the benefit, the before, the after. Those stories don't often get told in IT. A lot of times, IT is considered the machine that makes the other things go. I love the way that you have that on the readily available on the top of your head of what these costs were for the business and where you're bettering it, because we have to tell stories. We have to tell what and explain to folks why this is better for them, right? So you have several new directors or heads of departments here that weren't here when things were
Right.
in the old school. They're in the new school today, and they're benefactors of what you've done. So I've had a chance to talk to them. I was talking with John downstairs in the call center, and
Oh, okay.
the call center is completely transformed since before you came aboard. So there are things that your footprint, our fingerprints are all over. So
Yeah, I think we've centralized both call center and dispatch since we made our major UCAS shift.
yeah, it's awesome. I'm looking forward to hearing a little bit about some of the new technology here. So we talked about it briefly when we were describing the Pro Pipe and the way in which you capture video for some of these municipalities on these pipes. But walk everybody through this robotic video device that you utilize. I think it's super fascinating. Um, People are familiar with drones that fly overhead, but when you're going down infrastructure under pipes and having to know exactly where they are videoing, you have GIS and GPS enabled machines that know exactly where they're at by the what is it? What
Oh,
inches,
they're
nanometers?
substantially, these devices are substantially more costly and accurate than the phone that's in your hand, for
Yeah, for
sure.
sure.
Because remember, these are municipalities. And one of the ways, a listener might kind of identify with that is when you see the individuals in the street and they've got a paint gun, that extended paint gun, and they're going to spray,
Sure.
and they're standing next to a guy that looks like he has some sort of emitter, right?
Okay.
Well, they're looking for pipes. They're looking for pipes in a certain place because we've told them
Where they are.
where the pipes are, and they have to be hyper accurate. So to kind of peel back on that, a city will tell us, we don't go to an address. We get GPS coordinates for a manhole, and then that manhole has a number on it. So we know, hey, we're going to start at, let's say manhole number 10, and maybe we're going upstream or downstream. But, your job today is you're going to head downstream from this manhole, and for each segment, you're going to shoot us a video, and then we're going to have assurance that, hey, that there's no root invasion, there's no earthquake settling, there's no whatever they may be. We're attesting to the health of that pipe segment. And so the way that is done is we have camera trucks, which are box trucks, and they're a much more sophisticated version than what you see in these spy movies where, we're not hiding the fact that it's a camera truck, right?
Right.
So there literally is a little office back there with a computer desk and some audio video gear. And then just to give you a concept of the scale, the truck itself and everything in it's a bit of inventory. The robots are lowered down into the workspace by cranes. I mean, there's a crane in the back.
They're that heavy.
Oh, sure. They're substantially heavy. And these go all the way from, small, something about as wide in diameter as maybe a football to something with little tank treadles on it that kind of looks like a bomb sniffing robot just without the arms. Now, the challenge is, from a convergence standpoint, there are a number of video technology manufacturers in the marketplace.
Yep. Different codecs, different.
They issue different software. They embed different firmware into the cameras. So we can't tell, the city of Houston, oh, you want us to do a multi-million-dollar contract? We use a different video codec than you use. So snap it up, right?
Yeah.
No, we have to adopt whatever it is they're using. And I would say, if you really put your finger to it, there are a little over a half a dozen internationally known camera technologies that are different. And so you have to shoot video in that native format, and the deliverable is the final engineered video with all the chapter stops on it. Because think about it, you're a city engineer. I give you a 90-minute long video of an underground pipe.
You're going to go to sleep.
Yeah, it's not. So all you're looking for are the markers that our quality control engineers put in
you
place.
Want to see, they want them to see a crack or an event.
Or a root invasion, a crack, a blemish, something notable.
Sure.
That happens. So that's why the importance of not only the camera operator being highly trained and having the tech, but the QC engineer having the additional markup technology. Mm-hmm. And what that comes down to is we've got to capture, edit, and retain hundreds of gigabytes. And in fact, our newest array, I think the one we're posting up now is a half petabyte, right? So we're approaching a full petabyte of storage in calendar year 2019.
Right.
And that'll be moved to a alternate location. We also, our partner, we rely quite heavily on their cloud connector technology. And once again, I'm not spinning all that disk. I've got a multi-tiered approach using Amazon's S3 as well as Glacier for the stuff that doesn't go in and out fast. And then from a business standpoint, we negotiate with certain clients so unless you want one of those specific codec video formats, we try to shoot everything in your native format, but then retain it in MP4. So essentially, most people just want their report and want to know that there's a video because their state utilities commission requires that they have video evidence available. Mm-hmm. And that's where we come in, storing that video indefinitely or for long periods of time. Second are the people who probably want to look at the video once or know that the video was there. And that's why our emerging strategy involves just an MP4 basic codec. We're developing a portal to where they can look at their online mapping as well as their what we consider their CCTV video.
Right.
And then there's the remainder, and that's where one of the most interesting solves was. There's the ultra large clients, kind of that Pareto rule, the few but very large clients who say, no, you shot it in a particular proprietary technology. I want that video retained in that technology format.
Sure.
And I want it accessible to me. So we spent a great amount of time focusing on how to unify all those formats through a proprietary codec. And we worked with a very, as far as I know, well-known partner in the industry using virtual desktop technology. And what we did ultimately is an elegant solution that just really involves brute force. So when you come to your portal, you can see your GIS data mapping through our ArcGIS platform. You can look at certain videos in a general construct using MP4 linkage. And then for those that need that, let's say there's a company out there called Granite. You have to be able to see Granite videos. What I devised from a strategic perspective was just a virtual workspace for them using a full licensed copy, everything's appropriately licensed, of the actual software. So we don't tell them, hey, Mike, go log into your VMware portal and you can run your software remotely. The client just knows, hey, I can see certain things from the ERP system in my portal. I can see my GIS mapping. And then, oh, by the way, I use Granite to look at videos. It just says they're clicking on a link that says my videos. Client X's my video is one platform. Client Y's video is another platform. But we have appropriately licensed and serve it up based on an integral stack of a web portal, a virtual app stack, and then kicking over to Amazon depending upon the frequency that they need to access that video. And then by contract is how we have set the appropriate SLAs to make sure that that's accessible. Because why we project to accommodate the clients for those costs, I've got to actually be able to forecast
Of course.
those costs.
It's
So,
all back to the money.
so right, it's all back to how many times you're going to call up those videos. So
Right.
we've actually got a many-headed solution in terms of the video portal, but in terms of the CEO's mission one, getting all the way back to the beginning.
Why are we doing this?
Why, what do you want? Like,
Right.
what's making the biggest deal? And his thing was there are a few small regional competitors that had the perception of being better at technology than we were.
Because
Hoffman
they had a
has all
portal.
technology.
Because they had a way to view this information.
So what we did was, and we're almost done with all the primary iterations. So the new field services management platform is in execution. End of Q2, it'll be in every branch. Tablets over the summer in the hands of every tech.
Back to mobility, yeah.
Yeah, so it's all about paperless. It's all about mobility. It's all about the client being able to do what they want, so that every time now, especially in 2019, when people say, "Oh, Hoffman has this old technology," I said, "Well, if you mean besides our extremely advanced data network, our top-of-the-line phone systems, our browser-driven data warehouse with dashboard-enabled metrics, right? Our ERP system that's literally reduced about 80 pages of paper per case. And again, it's not fully adopted, so it's what I'd call in execution. And then ultimately this portal, right, the ProPipe portal, before the sun sets on 2019, the Hoffman Southwest family of companies will no doubt be the most avant-garde plumbing and water flow company out there.
Congratulations! That's a busy 2 years.
Yeah, where's the "that was easy" button?
I'm sitting right next to you.
Yeah.
But at any rate,
very well.
So, Rob, thanks for sharing with us that transformation here at Hoffman. You've definitely put your fingerprint and your stamp all over this transformation, and they're better for you. The numbers speak it. The technology and enablement of the mobility is another textbook example of what's going on. You were one of my favorites to have on the CIO panels, because this was again a textbook example of how to go from an infrastructure-based environment to a cloud-enabled environment. That video example you just gave us, enabling cloud technologies to be your new servers and worrying more about how you're going to serve the content. There was never a conversation as to what infrastructure you're going to put that on. It's all now. It's what's the best platform for enablement. How am I going to access it? And that's really the new school. So glad to have you as part of the network, and folks here can find you at the OCTP, or what other haunts do you haunt?
Well, OCTP, VEN,
Yep.
and then
Visionary
Executives Network, and then I have I will testify that I have let my SIM involvement go, but SIM, in particular OC SIM,
Yep.
a lot of great people there. I
Yep.
need to get myself a little back more involved.
Yep. And then there's some security, some of the ISSA groups that meet in Orange County that you and your team will be heading to here
Absolutely,
shortly.
and I would be remiss if I didn't give a shout out. I mean, you've noticed my financial based approach. I went back as an adult learner from 2009 to 2012, and earned my MBA from Webster University,
Awesome.
which is a 100-year-old university based out of St. Louis. Webster itself is the Irvine campus is the host of a number of information security events, and is, I believe, the only bona fide university in the area offering a cybersecurity graduate degree. And Webster in general, nice people, the facility, great facility. And I'd also, one other group out there that's pretty good is my good friend Bruce McCullough, who runs Orange County TANG,
Yep.
right? Technology Guys Network Group.
Yep.
He does a lot of daytime transitional meeting to keep people networked, and some things at a few places like the Cove in Irvine and a few other places. There's just a really well-intended and well-informed group of people in Orange County. And I'm happy to know a lot of them. In fact, those connections, including David and his team over at
Pac Dental.
Pac Dental, they made it easier for us to research and adopt our UCAS platform.
Sure.
Not for any benefit other than just
That's a
nice
perfect
people
example
being
of the
nice
network,
to people
right?
they know. Yeah,
That's right.
absolutely.
That's how the network here works.
Yep.
That's what we're facilitating here on the boardroom sessions is the network. And so, Rob, I'll leave your LinkedIn profile on the show notes so people can reach out if they want some information and help. And again, thank you for sharing your time with us.
I'm happy to share. Great seeing you, Mike.
Awesome. Thank you. Hey, Mike here. Hope you liked this boardroom session. Please check back to your future sessions as we're recording a new one every month. If you want to reach out, look for me on LinkedIn or send me a note at mike@sidepath.com. That's Mike at sidepath.com.